and have left communities and constituencies in turmoil. You know, Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of the Commission's public hearings, I took the opportunity to attend meetings in Sydney and Baddeck. I went to hear what residents were saying and suggesting, with no intention of speaking to the Commission. Like many others, I submitted a written submission to the Commission. But I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I was very surprised at the meeting in Baddeck to hear the executive of the Victoria of the Lakes NDP Association make a suggestion to merge the ridings of Victoria and Inverness. Ironically, two more opposition-held constituencies. The suggestion was to take away the Lakes portion of Victoria of the Lakes, and that Victoria County and Inverness County would be joined to form one constituency. Now, Mr. Speaker, last evening I spoke of the challenges that faces some constituencies because of geography. So can you imagine what this NDP suggestion would do to the rights of the wonderful people of Victoria and Inverness? So, Mr. Speaker, as you can imagine, I had to speak. And I read the written submission at that time that I had given the Commission. And thankfully for those people, and to their credit, the Commission did not consider this ludicrous suggestion. But back to how we got here. Mr. Speaker, we saw an NDP-dominated select committee, of which I was a member, tour the province to hear Nova Scotians, and an NDP majority that didn't hear a word that was said in that process. The committee had an in-camera meeting, but other than to discuss names of potential commissioners, why was it secret? It didn't have to be. Held over the holidays on Friday, where the media was forced to sit outside, where there was a major change in the rules, where a secretive, government-led decision was made to accomplish 6 things, and the members opposite can blame nobody else but themselves for what happened. First, the concept of protected seats was obliterated. Secondly, it was virtually guaranteed that industrial Cape Breton would lose a seat. Likely the seat in the middle, something close to you, Mr. Speaker. Third, it was likely a seat would be cut out of Pictou, Antigonish, Guysborough, as it was under the first report and since reversed. Fourth, Southern Nova Scotia would lose 1 or 2 seats, just like the ferry and thousands of jobs under the NDP. Fifth, areas where the NDP are strongest would gain the seats in the legislature. And sixth, as a result of eliminating protected seats, it was likely, very likely, Mr. Speaker, to observers who studied the situation, that Shelburne or Yarmouth would be split in 2. But being the NDP, they wouldn't come out and say they were eliminating the protected and other seats. They chose wording to obscure that. So obscure, Mr. Speaker, that others, including the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, could not believe the government really meant to eliminate all discretion, especially given the weight of the submissions they heard and that the Select Committee had heard. But the majority on that committee now completely ignored. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I also mentioned last night that it was bad enough that the official opposition wasn't willing to take a stand when the NDP headed down the wrong road either. They also, Mr. Speaker, have done what no party should do. What no party, and especially no leader, should ever do is say one thing in one part of the province and another elsewhere to curry favour. Mr. Speaker, leaders have to be leaders. They have to take positions based on whether they are right or wrong. So I was saddened to read the transcript for the Annapolis meeting of the Boundaries Commission. In that meeting, the leader of the Liberal Party suggested that the Boundaries Commission leave his constituency alone and that they readjust boundaries in some other constituencies. And do you know one of the places he suggested could be readjusted, Mr. Speaker? It was Shelburne. So, Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of the House, I would like to read from the Provincial Electoral Boundaries Commission report of Thursday, August 16th in Annapolis Royal. In it, it says, our Premier and Justice Minister, and I quote, and this is from the leader of the Liberal Party, our Premier and Justice Minister have forced you to look at population alone, with an average riding being 13,684. So as we look at southwestern Nova Scotia, the riding of Annapolis is exactly where it should be based on population, as well as the constituencies of Yarmouth and the county of Lunenburg could have 2 seats based on population. So when you look at southwestern Nova Scotia, the ridings that are not are Clare, Argyll, Shelburne, Digby, and Queens. It is in these ridings that the population problem needs to be fixed, not here in Annapolis. And I go on from the quote saying, I know other solutions have been looked at by the Commission, and I know that some others have been presented to you at meetings like this one. For example, like combining Clare and Argyll, or merging Argyll with the municipality of the District of Barrington, then combining Queens with the remaining of Shelburne County, and combining Clare with Digby. All of these would meet the population target set by the NDP government. There's no question that the job you've been asked to do is a difficult one, particularly when government has interfered with the independence of your commission. There's no question that your decisions will affect ridings and communities, and some will not be happy. That is why I believe it is important that we impact only the communities that need to be, end quote. And I will table that, Madam Speaker. After reading that, Madam Speaker, it's odd that that same leader went to a public meeting in Shelburne the other week and on the stage before 300 or 400 people said he was on their side. Madam Speaker, that's what happens when leaders and cabinet ministers mess with boundaries. And I say, through you, Madam Speaker, to the leader, that leaders need to rise above the fray, not stir the pot on what's supposed to be a process so fundamental to our democracy that the law requires it to be independent and left to a commission, not we as politicians. Madam Speaker, a Liberal employee suggested the split, and the Liberal leader drew the Commission's attention to Shelburne as well. Leaders can't be advocating solutions that are best for them. They should take a position that is right, which in this case would have been to let the Commission do its job and not repeat the NDP mistake of interfering in a nonpartisan process. Madam Speaker, the Commission asked if there was more they needed to consider as they started out, and the Speaker properly told them that nobody could tell them what to do. They came back with a report that the NDP hated. Being the majority party, the inevitable happened, and some NDP seats were on the chopping block. So the NDP got mad. they got righteous, and they got high-handed. For the first time in our history, an independent commission in the midst of important deliberations was told what to do by a government. They weren't given the resources to find answers on their own, independently. They didn't have hearings to consider different legal arguments. They were told by a Minister of Justice who understands independence so poorly, he asked for a meeting with the chair of the commission so he could tell them what to do. And from that moment, Madam Speaker, the credibility of the process was held below the waterline. Independence was taken away. So no hearings were held. Leaving nothing to chance, the NDP sent ministers and the Premier to ask for changes at the hearings. NDP changes. That has not happened before. It should never happen. The Executive Council has to butt out, or how can anyone say there is true independence? Since we've had the sorry sagas of Yarmouth and Shelburne, both of which are byproducts of what the NDP set out to do, they can't blame the commissioners. Somebody was going to have to be split and or combined in a way they would hate. So, because of all the interference, all the crossing of boundaries by this government, boundaries that should be unthinkable to cross, I and this caucus stand to oppose this bill, just as we have opposed each and every sorry twist in the NDP's politically driven path. This bill is the product of the NDP repeatedly targeting a process that should have gone beyond politics, Madam Speaker. And on principle, we must vote against it. So thank you for that, Madam Speaker, and I'll take my seat.
Thank you. I now recognize the honourable member for Shelburne.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak to the electoral boundaries changes in Bill 94. Madam Speaker, I want to begin with some advice I was given by a veteran MLA, the member from Timberley Prospect, before I gave one of my very first speech from the floor of this famous house. The member took me aside and told me something I never forgot, and something that is practically relevant today. He said to me, always speak from the heart, and always imagine that all the residents from across Shelburne County are looking down from the gallery. Mr. Speaker, that was great advice, and today I'm proud to rise in this House and speak on behalf of all the people of Shelburne County. Madam Speaker, the seat I occupy in this House belongs to them. It has since before Confederation, and they want it to stay that way well into the future. Madam Speaker, in the Electoral Boundaries Commission interim report, the suggestion for Shelburne County was short and to the point. No change. But when the Commission released its final report, the people of Shelburne were blindsided by a recommendation to cut their county in half. Madam Speaker, this recommendation was done without any prior warning to the people of Shelburne County and without consultation with them. In this regard, the Commission has failed the people of Shelburne County, and at this time I would like to table a document, a letter from the former warden for the municipality of the District of Shelburne, Mr. Sherm Emery, and I ask all members to get a copy, and please review that at your leisure. Madam Speaker, quite simply put, if the Commission had any intent to split the constituent Shelburne County, which has existed since the mid-1700s, they had an obligation to give the residents a fair warning and to visit the community and to hear their concerns. But they did neither, which is why I rise in this House today to ensure that they have an opportunity to have their say. Madam Speaker, other communities from across our beautiful province was given an opportunity to have their voice heard. This summer, the Commission met with Acadian communities in Tuscott and in Church Point. It met in Yarmouth, where the people there were very vocal about that seat being split. They met in Bridgewater, where the current Liberal candidate and another Liberal staffer gave presentations recommending splitting Shelburne County at Clyde River. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to document the Hansen report, the printout of that, and again, I encourage all members to review that particular document. Madam Speaker, this desire also was hinted at by a member from Yarmouth on August the 13th and echoed by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in Annapolis on August the 16th, 2012. And Madam Speaker, visiting communities and hearing those presentations was part of the process. Members of the Liberal Party were given the opportunity to suggest that Shelburne County be split down the middle, and they took the opportunity. I just wish that they had been more upfront with the people of Shelburne County, both prior and to after the Commission's release its final report. But Madam Speaker, there is no doubt this is not an easy process. And I understand the Commission was faced with many tough decisions. Reviewing boundaries is by no means a simple exercise. But nonetheless, that doesn't change the fact the relationship to Shelburne County, the Commission failed. It did not give the residents an opportunity to have their voice heard as outlined in the terms and the conditions. It did not take the time to hold a meeting in Shelburne County. And it's for that reason, Madam Speaker, that I want to thank the member from Pictou Centre for his giving the people of Shelburne County an opportunity to speak at law amendments. Now, the councillors, the 3 mayors, and the 2 wardens of Shelburne County will have their chance to have their say. Now, the men and women who work long hours in our schools and our businesses and on the many Cape Island boats that dot our coastline will be able to speak to this recommendation that has completely blindsided them. And Madam Speaker, this House of Assembly is about checks and balances, but it's also about ensuring that the democratic rights and freedom of all Nova Scotians, I repeat, all Nova Scotians, are protected. Moving law amendments to Shelburne was somewhat unprecedented, but not nearly as unprecedented as splitting up a constituency that existed for more than 250 years without consulting the residents. And Madam Speaker, I expect my colleagues on the other side of this House agree with the decision to have law amendments travel to Shelburne County. After all, it was the member from Cumberland South who suggested that idea at a recent meeting held at Barrington. It was a good idea, which is why I discussed it with the Minister of Justice. I also want to point out that following that meeting, the Honourable Leader of the official opposition was quoted as saying, and I quote, "Shelburne has been denied a chance to be heard in their home community, and I think that's wrong," end quote. Madam Speaker, I know I read the comments in the media that the member from Richmond is against law amendments committee traveling to Shelburne County, contrary to what his leader said just 3 days before. Madam Speaker.
Order, please. Recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, I at no time suggested that law amendments should not go down to Shelburne. In fact, I suggested if it was going to Shelburne, it should as well go to the community of Harbour-Boucher, where I attended a meeting on Sunday evening with the Minister of Transportation, where they feel that they have not been heard by the Law Amendments Committee. So for the Minister of Fisheries to suggest comments that I have not made, I would ask the Speaker to caution the Minister to make misrepresentations about other people's comments in the House.
I would find that that is not a point of order. The honourable member for Shelburne and the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this opportunity certainly is very important to the people of Shelburne County, so my hope is that was just the result of some internal miscommunications with the Liberal caucus. Surely, we can all agree that the people of Shelburne County deserve their chance. Madam Speaker, in closing, I want to say again that this seat that I rise from belongs to the people of Shelburne County. It has belonged to them long before I was MLA, and I hope it will belong to them long after I am MLA. But by not including the people of Shelburne County in this process, the Boundary Commission has clearly failed the constituency of Shelburne County. Fortunately, they will now have a chance to have their say, to tell the Law Amendments Committee that they want their committee, that the communities that make up Shelburne County to remain united. This is their right, Madam Speaker, and they deserve the attention of all members of this House and the Law Amendments Committee. And I hope when they are given the opportunity, each member of this House will listen very carefully and consider the desire of our constituency of Shelburne County to remain united as this bill continues to move through this House. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
I now recognize the honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to share with you, and through you, with all members of the House, some of the feedback from the people of Clare on the electoral boundary review that started on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2011. Madam Speaker, since the start of this boundary review exercise in 2011 and so far this year, this exercise has been an emotional roller coaster ride for the residents of Clare for the past 10 months. And the deep shock was felt on December 31st, 2011. As stated on the front page of the Chronicle Herald that morning, Madam Speaker, and I quote, "Acadian black seats lose protection." Furthermore, the reporter, David Jackson, on the front page of that Herald that morning, also want to quote, said the NDP government has eliminated special protection for 4 seats in the legislature, 3 in Acadian areas and 1 in an African Nova Scotian district in the next setting of electoral boundaries. Well, Madam Speaker, people in Clare could not believe. They could not believe what they read on the front page of the Chronicle Herald that morning. And I have to say myself, neither could I when I read that article that same morning. Yet, Madam Speaker, it was written in black and white. The citizens in Clare, Madam Speaker, were confused, were upset to what it all meant. It was a total surprise. It was a total shock. You know, the headline in the Chronicle Herald on New Year's Eve, Madam Speaker, people have asked me, you know, was this an NDP New Year's Eve resolution? Well, I can tell you, reading this headline, Acadian black seats lose protection, on December 31st, 2011, in every household, Madam Speaker, in every coffee shop, everywhere people gathered on that day. The headline created a lot of discussion in the days to follow, and even to this day, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, was it an NDP New Year's resolution to target Acadian ridings? Again, I quote, "Acadian black seats lose protection." Madam Speaker, this headline has stirred a lot of emotions and has upset the residents in Clare over the last 10 months. People in Clare, Madam Speaker, are disgusted with our NDP government. They're mad. They're hurt, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the million-dollar question that I have been hearing all along since this review started is, why is the NDP government eliminating the 4 protected seats at this time? Why is the NDP government doing this to us? What have we done to the NDP government to deserve this? Good question. Madam Speaker, why break? Why break the long-standing Nova Scotian tradition to have 4 protected seats? Obviously, the question that comes to mind, what is the source of such a drastic initiative? Who gave the authority to eliminate the 4 protected ridings? Madam Speaker, I believe we all know who gave that order to eliminate the 4 protected seats in this legislature. Madam Speaker, trying to understand why the NDP government has decided to eliminate the 4 protected ridings, many people have said it's all about politics. And they're right. It's all about politics. It's a fact, Madam Speaker, the 3 targeted Acadian ridings have never elected an NDP member to the Nova Scotia Legislature Assembly. Well, public opinion in these ridings has it that the NDP government wants to eliminate seats in rural Nova Scotia in order to create new seats in Halifax, where the NDP party has a stronger base. There are no clear explanation to the government's objective here to eliminate the 4 protected seats of Argyll, Clare, Preston, and Richmond. Madam Speaker, granted, these ridings are small. They were small 10 years ago. They were small 20 years ago. Let's go back to November 2011. Let's go back to the Standing Committee on establishing an Electoral Boundary Commission, a committee which has a majority of NDP members. A committee, we have 9 members. 5 committee members are from the NDP caucus. 2 members are from the Liberal caucus, and 2 members are from the PC caucus. Now, it's the Standing Committee's responsibility to determine the terms of reference for the Commission and to select members of the Commission. Madam Speaker, prior to submitting this report on December 30th, 2011, the Special Standing Committee of the House conducted special public hearings across the province. The committee members heard what the general public had to say on the composition of the Commission and on the terms of reference for the Commission, and they've heard also other suggestions. Madam Speaker, when this special legislative committee held its public meeting in Yarmouth at the Grand Hotel on Tuesday, November 29th, I had the opportunity to sit in as a committee member replacing one of my colleagues that evening. and that afternoon as well. I recall, Madam Speaker, there were 22 presentations made at the meeting by residents from Yarmouth, from Argyll, and from Clare. I also recall that these presenters were very clear as to what they were requesting from the committee members. They clearly requested that measures should be taken to leave their ridings alone, measures to make sure that there is someone on the commission appointed to represent the Acadian community, and to assure there is translation service available at designated meetings, especially to be held in Acadian communities. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, one of these requests was not taken into consideration. Measures to protect the Acadian ridings were not taken into account. 4 members of the committee requested such measures, but the 5 NDP committee members did not support such a position. So, Madam Speaker, the report of the Select Committee was tabled on December 30th, 2011. The majority of the NDP members on the committee certainly did not do what they were asked by the people gathered at the public meeting in Yarmouth. Madam Speaker, looking back, I have to question myself, why did the Standing Committee have a meeting in Yarmouth? It appears that the NDP had already decided what the terms of references for the Commission would be and decided not to take into consideration what they heard at the public consultation meeting in Yarmouth. Now, last Friday during the debate on this bill, when the debate started, both my colleagues, the honourable member from Richmond and the honourable member from Argyll, who were both members of the Standing Committee, expressed their concerns on the terms of references targeting the 4 protected seats. Madam Speaker, as you're aware, all 4 opposition party members on the committee who could not support the terms of references approved by the committee filed a dissenting opinion. Madam Speaker, in 1991, for the first time in our province history, I guess, an independent electoral boundary commission was appointed. Back in 1991, Madam Speaker, an independent electoral boundary commission was appointed to review the electoral boundaries of our provincial ridings and make recommendations where they saw fit. Well, this new practice was supported by all political parties in the House. Madam Speaker, having an independent commission appointed to review the electoral boundaries of our provincial ridings every 10 years was the right decision made by all political parties. Now, this new practice established back in 91-92 was repeated in 2001, 2002, and now again in 2011-2012. Madam Speaker, the reason I raised the history of these 2 previous electoral boundary reviews, in both previous reviews, the terms of references allowed the Electoral Boundary Commission to deviate from parity of voting power and consider other factors in determining effective representation for some voters. The terms of references at that time were clearly spelled out, and specifically asking the 2 boundary commissions to take measures aiming at assuring a fair chance of electing representatives of these 2 minority groups. Now, other factors to consider included geography, community history, community interests, Nova Scotia linguistic and cultural diversity. Madam Speaker, in December 2011, the terms of references for the Boundary Commission were dictated by the majority NDP members on the Standing Committee to reflect the will of the NDP government. There was no discussion. There was no debate. It was a fait accompli before engaging the boundary reviews. Madam Speaker, for the record, it has to be noted the 4 opposition members on the Standing Committee filed a dissenting opinion in opposing the 5 NDP committee members in approving the terms of references. Only NDP members endorsed the disappearance of the 4 protected ridings. Madam Speaker, why to have the notwithstanding clause 2D in the terms of reference? This is what the people of Clare can't understand. You know, where did this famous clause 2D come from? But again, why is the NDP government determined to eliminate special protection for minorities in Nova Scotia that was already granted to us by 2 previous electoral boundary commissions? We all know by creating these protected seats, there is no guarantee that people in these 4 protected ridings will elect an Acadian or an African Nova Scotian to represent them. This is a free democratic society we're living in, and yes, as a democratic society, we should all respect who voters decide to elect to represent them in this House of Assembly, Madam Speaker. I know the people of Clare has always elected an Acadian to represent them in the legislature. Madam Speaker, the first Acadian from Clare to be elected was Frédéric Armand Robichaud on January 12, 1837. The first Acadian to represent the constituency of Clare at the time, back in 1837, was Frédéric Armand Robichaud. Madam Speaker, the people of Clare have always appreciated past governments respecting and recognizing us as a minority to allow us to elect whom we choose to represent us in the legislature. And to my knowledge, there has never been an uproar against this practice anywhere, giving special consideration to these 4 protected seats. So again, to my knowledge, there has never been an uproar anywhere against this practice. So why did past governments allow Acadians to have effective representation? It was because past governments respected the official minority status of the Acadians. I believe, Madam Speaker, that past governments recognized the advantages of these 4 protected ridings, the opportunity to elect one of their own. And also because past governments saw the advantages of having these 4 protected ridings represented in the provincial assembly. So, Madam Speaker, I hope you can understand why the people of Clare are disappointed. Now, we have the NDP government who want for all provincial ridings to be within 25% below or above the provincial average. That seems fair and equal, but it does not take into account other factors. Madam Speaker, I heard many people in Clare ask, why is the NDP government raising the bar for Clare? To have a set minimum number of voters in order to continue to exist as a riding for the next provincial election. Why raise the bar? Madam Speaker, we have all heard the government spin doctors talking about vote parity and nothing else than vote parity. No other factors should be considered. So why did the provincial NDP government decide to cancel all other factors by imposing the notwithstanding clause in the terms of references. Madam Speaker, this 25% variance makes it impossible for the Electoral Boundary Commission to consider any other factors in determining the future of the 4 existing protected ridings. Madam Speaker, before the public consultation started by the Boundary Commission and came to Clare in April, the community was very upset. Our community in Clare was very upset. Our warden, under his leadership, Jean Melanson, established a committee to help council clarify its position regarding the upcoming boundary review. Members of the committee that he appointed included les membres de ce comité. Madame la Présidente était Alistair Surette, le président de l'Université Sainte-Anne, Kenneth Godet, le président du Conseil scolaire acadien provincial, Paul Comeau, un grand défendeur de la langue et de la culture acadienne, et un ardent travailleur pour la promotion de la région de Clare. Paul-Émile Leblanc, président de la Chambre de commerce de Clare. Madame Elaine Timot, représentante de la Fédération acadienne de Nouvelle-Écosse. Nicole Potier et Colette DeVaux-King, membres de ce comité, et moi-même. Madam Speaker, prior to the public meeting with the Boundary Commission in Clare on April the 20th, the Municipal Council organized a public meeting in Clare to inform our residents and to seek input from them. Over 200 people gathered on Tuesday, April 3rd at the local Legion in Sonyville. Madam Speaker, before I get to the meeting with the Commission in Clare, I want to mention that our local radio station, CFA, did an outstanding job in informing our residents all throughout this exercise. Also, I want to point out the outstanding work done by Le Courrier de la Nouvelle-Écosse on this file as well. This French weekly newspaper had regular feature articles, editorials, letters to the editor, and interviews in informing the general public. Also, I want to acknowledge the work that other local medias did to inform the public. The Yarmouth Vanguard, the Digby Courier, CGLS in Yarmouth, AVR in the Valley, and the provincial media as well. Madam Speaker, Friday, April 20th, 2012, is a memorable day for Clare. And I'll tell you why. Over 550 people gathered in the gym at Université Sainte-Anne to meet with the Electoral Boundary Commission on a Friday night. So on a Friday night, just imagine trying to attract over 550 people. This was just remarkable. I was proud to see that large group of people in attendance. Again, just before the public meeting started, a tintamarre was organized outside the gym to escort the members of the commission to the meeting. Madam Speaker, a tintamarre is a gathering of Acadians to show their fierté of their culture. It's a noise-makery session to show the vitality of the community. We had some people who dressed up in our traditional Acadian costumes and used noise-making objects. Acadian flags were flying in the parade. They had cowbells, horns, anything to make much noise as possible to show they are proud of who they are. The crowd gathered in a peaceful demonstration. Membres de la troupe de danse de la Béangeois, dressed up in their traditional Acadian costumes, led the Tintamarre parade that night. As people were coming into the gym, showing how proud they were of their culture, their language, and of their constituency. When the chair, Theresa McNeil, called the meeting to order, she explained to the crowd that the members of the Commission would appreciate to be able to hear the presenters as they made their presentations, and the crowd was allowed to make some noise and fly their flags, which they did before, after, and between presentations. The instructions were followed, Madam Speaker, and during the presentations, you could have heard a pin drop. The crowd certainly supported the presenters and showed respect to the members of the Boundary Commission. Madam Speaker, the Commission members certainly came out that night to listen to what the people of Clare had to say. And it was reflected in their first interim report. The first interim report was greatly appreciated by the people of Clare, and I'll have more to say later on that report. Madam Speaker, the highlight of this boundary review for me was to see our youth involvement. Many students made presentations to the Commission at the public meetings in Tuscott and in Clare, and I want to acknowledge their work, their participation. It certainly did not go unnoticed. Madam Speaker, I was also invited to participate in a youth rally at École Secondaire de Clare. This forum was organized by a group of high school students, Student Council President Briar Spinney, students Nicole Timat, Darylyn Como, and Stephanie McLean. And they did a super job, Madam Speaker. After the invited guests had a chance to make some opening comments on the boundary review, students had the opportunity to ask questions from the floor. Madam Speaker, I was surprised to see how well the meeting was run and how interested the students were and knowledgeable with this boundary review. Madam Speaker, the headline in the Chronicle Herald on December 31st, 2011, and I quote, "Acadian black seats lose protection." This headline, Madam Speaker, had a far-reaching effect, not just in Clare, but far-reaching effect across our province and outside our province. Let me share with you one example to show how deeply disappointed some young Acadians were after reading this headline in the Herald. Madam Speaker, a group of students at École Secondaire de Clare decided to lower the flag at half-mast at school in protest to the actions of this NDP government. This was a very emotional day for these students. Madam Speaker, this is the only time that I can recall a symbolic action of this nature was ever taken in Clare. At some point throughout the day, someone from the Department of Education in Halifax called the school to tell them this gesture was not allowed and they needed to put their flags back up. Now, Madam Speaker, for days following the action taken by the Department of Education, the people of Clare rallied behind our students. Madam Speaker, what a pity gesture on the part of the Department of Education and the NDP government. Well, if the students weren't allowed to fly their school flag at half-mast, many individuals at home did, many businesses did, even our municipal council office flew their flags at half-mast in support of our students. And Madam Speaker, I'll table a copy of that article just in case somebody would like to read that. Madam Speaker, on Friday, June the 1st, the Electoral Boundary Commission submitted their first interim report. Madam Speaker, I can tell you the Acadian community throughout Nova Scotia and in Clare were delighted with the report recommending to leave the 4 protected ridings alone. It reflected the opinion of the Acadians expressed at the special committee hearing in Yarmouth last November and at the public meeting with the Commission in Clare back on that Friday, April 20th. Madam Speaker, after the press conference that morning in Halifax, a reporter from our local radio station, CFA, which was in attendance, did a press conference live from Province House. And I was told it didn't matter where you were in Clare that day. Everybody talked about the Commission's recommendations to protect the 4 protected ridings, including Clare. Everybody was pleased with the outcome, and they were all proud Nova Scotians, Madam Speaker. They were all proud Nova Scotians. Well, as we all know, the good news didn't last too long once the Attorney General stepped in the debate to tell the Commission before they finished their work, mind you, before they finished their work, that their interim report was null and void. Yeah, absolutely. My colleague here is indicating, you know, the Attorney General probably had some directives from somewhere else. You know, the intervention by the Attorney General caused an uproar, Madam Speaker, caused an uproar throughout the Acadian community, and this uproar has intensified. So I'm sure, Madam Speaker, the members of the Commission were disappointed to hear the Attorney General on behalf of the NDP government telling them he could not accept their interim report. Well, the members of the Commission decided to try again and come up with another report. Madam Speaker, on Friday, July the 20th, the Commission released its second interim report. Madam Speaker, the people of Clare weren't happy this time around, nor were Acadians and Francophones throughout our province. The Commission was proposing major changes for the 4 protected seats. The Commission recommended that the riding of Yarmouth be split up and the municipality of Yarmouth be combined with Clare to make up a new riding. I can tell you the people of Yarmouth, along with the people of Clare, were not pleased with this recommendation, Madam Speaker. The Boundary Commission did come back to southwestern Nova Scotia for a second round of public consultation meetings. On Monday night, August 13th, I had the opportunity to attend a public meeting in the Yarmouth Mariner Centre. Over 2,500 people gathered that night. Over 2,500 people. I can't remember where I parked, but I know when I got there, there were cars parked everywhere you can think of. But I did manage to find eventually a parking spot. So again, that night, over 2,500 people gathered in the Mariner Centre in Yarmouth. Again, with such a large crowd, the meeting went very well. The meeting went very well. Everybody that wanted to make a presentation had the opportunity to be heard by the members of the Commission. It was not your typical 2-hour meeting. That meeting, Madam Speaker, ran till quite late that evening. The following night, the Commission came back to Clare on Tuesday, August 14th. It was a sad day in Clare, Madam Speaker. Over 300 people came out at the meeting. Only one major presentation from the municipality of Clare was made that night. Our warden, Chamination, made the presentation on behalf of the residents of Clare to the Electoral Boundary Commission. Our position in Clare had not changed that night, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, now with Bill 94, House of Assembly Act that's before the floor of this House, which proposes now that Clare and Digby be combined into one riding. So when I told you earlier that the people of Clare are upset, confused, don't know where we're going, you know, it seems this just continues. But I can tell you this. Many people in Clare has lost confidence with the boundary review process. Can we blame them? You know, it's been a roller coaster ride for the last 10 months. We had a first interim report that the people of Clare were delighted with. Then we had the Attorney General on behalf of the government stepped in and told the commission members the report was null and void. Could not accept the report. Commission went back to the table. They came back with a second interim report. At that time, in the second report, Madam Speaker, they had recommended that the District of Clare be combined with the municipality of Yarmouth. Again, the uproar went again. The people of Yarmouth weren't pleased. The people of Clare weren't pleased. We had public meetings that followed on the second round in Yarmouth and Clare. And then finally, once the commission delivered their final report to the government brought this bill that's before the House. Madam Speaker, many folks in Clare are of the opinion that the NDP government will do what they want, regardless of what the people of Clare has to say or what the Boundary Commission has to say. That doesn't matter. General public doesn't, it's not important in this discussion. Again, Madam Speaker, what the people of Clare failed to understand throughout this heavy-handed approach taken by the NDP government to do away with the 4 protected ridings. Clare has been electing an MLA since 1837. And now, all of a sudden, it's no longer allowed. So 1837, and we're telling the folks in Clare, hey, can't do it anymore. Why? Because someone, Madam Speaker, someone in government decided to do away with the 4 protected ridings because we're too small, as we're told. Well, who made that decision? I think people has a good sense of who that individual might be. But let me remind you, Madam Speaker, people in Clare have always voted in previous elections with very high turnouts. I remember my first election campaign back in 1993, May of 93, matter of fact. We had I think the voting turnout that election was over 91%. I remember like that just blew me away. You know, we had probably over 200 elections workers out there on election day in that election. And I remember friends of mine telling me they knew exactly who those few individuals in each poll who had not voted and why they had not voted. They knew exactly where they were. They were fishing on Georges. They were out visiting family in Western Canada. Everybody practically was accounted for. Like, I was just overwhelmed how they worked so hard during that campaign. So the people of Clare, yes, Madam Speaker, have been voting, and they certainly take their elections very seriously. But we'll have more to say on another day. So, Madam Speaker, in closing, this NDP government has poorly designed the outcome of this boundary review exercise from the word go. You know, we've been hearing this ever since the debate started on this bill. The so-called apparent public consultations done by the Standing Committee and the Boundary Commission was a mockery of democracy. Why? Because it didn't take the will of the people into consideration. It was a mockery of democracy. Such an important question, the disappearance of 4 protected ridings, was not done within an open debate, which is warranted on this question, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this has been a top-down decision imposed by the NDP government on the Special Committee, imposed on the Boundary Commission, imposed on Acadians throughout Nova Scotia, imposed on the people of Nova Scotia, and imposed on the people of Clare. Madam Speaker, to say that the people of Clare are upset is an understatement. And with those few comments, Madam Speaker, I will take my seat.
Thank you. I would ask the honourable member from Clare to table the Chronicle Herald article that he spoke from and quoted from, please. Thank you. I now recognize the honourable member for Inverness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is certainly a topic that's gathered a lot of headlines in the papers. It's affected every community, of course, around the province, some more than others. It's an issue that maybe it's better for politicians to have as little to do with the matter as possible. And for that reason, I almost feel like sitting down right now. But I'm not going to. The reason I say that is because all of us essentially are in a conflict of interest on this topic, because, or at least we could be perceived to be in a conflict of interest, because we have, of course, a history of seeing and throughout the past where electoral boundaries were modified to support certain candidates running for election. And it's not hard for us. We can look at our poll results in each of our constituencies. We can see where we did well, where we didn't do well. And if we had complete control, it'd be very easy for us to cookie cut a riding that would favor ourselves individually. And that's void of any political party. So I rise to speak today with some trepidation and with some reservation about expressing myself in any great detail on this matter. But I will say a couple of things. I know the terms for which the group was sent around the province, the independent group was sent around the province, the framework they were given, the terms they were given, was handed to them by a committee of the legislature. But I do want to point out that it was a committee which the governing party held a majority and held the control over what terms we put forth. And some terms really weren't given a chance to be debated at any great length. So, Madam Speaker, I think looking back, had that been done, there'd be less debate today, here now. Because with that debate having taken place and everybody putting their feelings on the table, maybe it could have been left wide open for the independent committee. So they could have went around the province, having already heard the proposed terms by the members in this legislature, but also coupling with that the impressions that Nova Scotians have on the matter. And Madam Speaker, excuse me, I think that would have given the committee a chance to explore these ideas and maybe give Nova Scotians more say over how they want their legislature to look. That might have taken some of the debate away that we're having now about what the term should have been. And so I want to put that on the record. I know there were a lot of public consultations. I wasn't at the first round of consultations. I did write a letter to the committee, and I remember telling them about my own constituency in Inverness and how it's such a large constituency. We heard the member from Victoria talk about this. And Inverness right now, for me to say depart the other side of Port Hawkesbury, drive through Port Hastings through to the Causeway, I'd have a number of routes from there. Well, actually, I'd have another route from around the other side of Port Hawkesbury, but I'll just take you. I do have a fast car, but I always drive at the speed limit. And stop before I blush. But Madam Speaker, if you were to follow through Port Hastings to the Causeway and continue up along Route 19 through Judic and Port Hood and Mabou and Inverness, and then going up maybe along the coast through Dunvegan or maybe through to Marguerite Forks and then up to Cheticamp, then you leave provincial roadways and you enter the National Park, the Cape Breton Highlands Park. Then you have to get to the part way through, you come to Pleasant Bay, another community that I represent. Then you get back into the park again for a little bit, and you come outside of Inverness County, and you have to drive for a bit through Victoria County to get back towards Meat Cove, which is back across the border in Inverness County. So I had a very nice trip up there this summer. I went up on my motorcycle and drove over some newly paved roads, and the member from Victoria, his Victoria the Lakes constituency, and I must commend him for his efforts to get that pavement for his constituents and for working with the government to make that happen. But I have to tell you, Madam Speaker, it was a long drive. My motorcycle holds quite a bit of fuel, and I had to stop for gas, and I basically burned about probably close to 2 tanks of gas, and that was from Judic to Meat Cove. And so, Madam Speaker, it was quite a trip. It took the whole day, and happens that at that particular day there were a lot of other motorcycles on the trail because they were having a rally to raise awareness about breast cancer and to raise money for that purpose. So, Madam Speaker, my point is that that's only one route across my constituency, and when I wrote to the Commission, I was telling about how large the constituency was and how I supported the idea of having a variance in population, because if we compare it to a constituency, say in Halifax, different demands on an MLA representing Halifax compared to a rural area. And I was glad that, and I wanted to voice my support for that factor of variance to ensure that they kept that, because it takes more time, I believe, at least in terms of trying to get around to see people, because people want to see their MLA, and they deserve to have a chance to see their MLA. A lot of people don't see their representative until it comes election time, and that's their chance to unload anything they might have on their mind, and it's a good opportunity for them to do that. So I did write a letter to the Commission supporting the variance of 25%, and I just wanted to make that understood, that the extra time involved and travel involved, and the need to try to make it fair for constituents whether they live in an urban part of the province or a rural part of the province. So, Madam Speaker, I know that when the committee traveled around, they had to make changes because of population shifts in the province, and I know a lot of the changes weren't welcomed by communities. And I also remember when I attended the for the second round in Port Hawkesbury, when they came out with the second round, that they had said, you know, one thing that we discovered as a committee was that areas that were happy with the first report, who didn't express their opinion because they were feeling like their needs had been addressed and didn't bother coming out to express their support for the decision made for their area, because that wasn't expressed, in some cases, that was lost in the second round, highlighting the difficulties in trying to please everybody and trying to make constituencies that allowed people to feel like their area was cohesive and it was related. So all the communities in a constituency would feel like they had some commonalities. And I can think of a meeting I was at just the other evening, and it was in Haverbushey, and where my father used to work at the train station there. And so I know the community a little bit, and the station is no longer there, but there's quite a few rail cars parked there in transit. I remember being on the platform, Madam Speaker, and maybe going with my father to work for the day, and I remember playing with some of the luggage carriers and with the old CB radios they used to use, and I'd love watching the trains come in. Would be counting the cars that would be going through. And I even got on the train one day, Madam Speaker, and the conductor brought me up to the engine, and I was allowed to blow the horn. And I scared the death out of myself that day because it was it ever loud? But I digress. You're probably not so interested in those stories, but I remember the fellow that let me do that. He was from New Glasgow, and I wish I could remember his name to put it on the record. Maybe I will at a future date. He also used to bring me Big Red chewing gum, Madam Speaker. So anyway, the little things you remember. So I was in Haverbushey, and I had a chance to hear what people were saying there, and they made some good points. Their constituency, they weren't happy in either case. The first time they were cutting Antigonish in half, eliminating that area from Antigonish. The second time they cut a smaller portion of Antigonish, but still eliminated their area from Antigonish County. And they made the point that in their area they hadn't dropped in population, so they shouldn't be penalized. But this, Madam Speaker, highlights the problem that the committee had in trying to decide the boundaries. For every decision made in one area, it affected the adjacent areas. But one of the points they made was that, you know, you have people living in the Haverbushey area whose children are going to school with people who would be living in the new proposed Antigonish constituency. They're going to two different MLAs for the same purpose, two groups of people. And I thought that made sense to me. But suffice it to say, it's just another example where people are not happy with the boundaries. So I know in my own area, I'm losing Port Hawkesbury. And I was disappointed to learn that. Of course, I try to stay connected with every area in my constituency, but I know I play lots of hockey in Port Hawkesbury. I know a lot of people there. Many people throughout Inverness County make the drive into the Strait area to work. We have obvious commonalities between us. And to me, Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, Port Hawkesbury is part of home to me. And I know a lot of the retail businesses in Port Hawkesbury benefit from the activity brought into town from people throughout Inverness County. So I was disappointed with that, but I respect the committee's independence, and for that reason I did express my disappointment, but I left it at that. I also said that it wasn't really my place to come out and start to recommend what should or shouldn't be part of my constituency. I'd rather hear from people, the people that are in the area. Now, I will tell you, I was traveling through, making a multi-day visit to the Acadian area of my constituency, in the Cheticamp area, and I had some of the Acadian people there tell me that they would like to be part of some kind of a protected Acadian constituency. And I certainly respect that. I can see why they feel the need to band together to protect their interests. And they've certainly achieved great things for their communities by sticking together. And I, coming from perhaps a different background, but another culture which has experienced marginalization throughout history, respect that. And I always encourage people, especially young people in the Acadian region, to make sure they speak their language. And I've also said on a number of occasions to parents to make sure they try to use it in the home, because I know that that is perhaps the strongest support to get people to speak a language is to be using it in the home. And of course, there's all kinds of television, Madam Speaker. Really, all the television that we would watch is mostly in English, and especially a lot of pop culture and a lot of music that's listened to would, of course, be in English. And that stands to reason, but that doesn't do much to support the notion for young people to continue speaking their native tongue. Another thing that I did say to that group of Acadians was that I wanted to be careful what I would say about that, because I do want to represent those people here in the legislature. I do respect their positions and their ability to have their own school board, for instance. And I would never want to send the message to Acadians in my constituency that, yes, please go off and band together with other Acadians to form a constituency, because I wouldn't want to send them the message that I don't want to represent them. And I enjoy going to the area. I have a lot of friends down that way as well, Madam Speaker. I'm always amazed at how much they love music, especially the Cape Breton fiddle music. And we have family friends that have developed over many years that exists between the Acadian region and the area I grew up in. And so we have commonalities, Madam Speaker, there, that while we may have come from different histories, if you go back far enough, we do share a lot of the same things today, and we enjoy a lot of the same things and appreciate our coexistence in Inverness County. I, on that same visit, spoke with a gentleman who told me that he wouldn't want to be, he was an Acadian, and he told me that he wouldn't want to be moved in with another group of Acadians in another part of the province, because he felt that, and he gave the example of roads, he said, I don't want to call somebody in another part of the province if I have an issue about a road. I want to call somebody who's down the road and, you know, a little closer at hand, and maybe even somebody who's traveling the same roads that, for instance, in this case, he and I would be traveling. So I thought that made sense too, Madam Speaker, and I guess the point being is it's good to, I think it's important that we hear from Nova Scotians how they feel. I'm more interested in hearing that. As I said when I started my remarks, I feel for me to speak about it is I am at least, if nothing else, perceived to be in too much of a conflict of interest to be making recommendations myself. Madam Speaker, I also want to mention when I was in Port Hawkesbury, a former MLA for Inverness, Danny Graham, former Liberal MLA, who's a good friend of mine as well, mentioned how in, I believe it was in New Zealand, and maybe Australia, and forgive me, Madam Speaker, but I don't have it in front of me right now, but that the Maori people there, the Indigenous people, and I believe it was in New Zealand, have I believe they have more than one constituency devoted to their people, and it may be a matter of creating a constituency where if you happen to be of Maori descent, you can sign up to be on the electoral list for those seats that are designated for the Maori peoples. And that's an interesting idea that came forward. And, you know, if enough people from a particular background wanted that, maybe it's something the committee could look at. again, there's the power of opening this up to broader discussion, to Nova Scotians, to let them have their say. And speaking of Indigenous peoples, Madam Speaker, I think about the Aboriginals that I represent here in Nova Scotia in the constituency of Inverness. It's an area that's actually growing in population, which is so different from many other areas. But the community I represent is Wakaba. There's also some reservation land around the area of Malagawatch, but the primary area is Wakaba. And I like to spend time there with them. And I also like to represent them here in this legislature. Many of them, Madam Speaker, many of the Aboriginals living in Wakaba, they often tell me, well, Alan, why should we vote for you? And I know I'm leaving myself open there, Madam Speaker, for some jeers here. But the reason they ask that is because so much of their fate is really determined by their band council and by the federal government, because they're living on federal lands, and because of the nature of the history there, of treaties and agreements, and that their band budgets, of course, come from the federal government. But, Madam Speaker, I also believe that I represent those people, and I take an active interest in their community. I do meet with their band council. I attend events whenever I can in their community. And, Madam Speaker, I also encourage the young people there to keep speaking their native language. And again, in a world of pop culture, a lot of young people may find that their native tongue is out of style, perhaps, or maybe not of use to them. But I can tell you, Madam Speaker, as they get older, I think they will appreciate knowing their language. And what a wonderful time when you're young to be doing it, to be learning your language so that you have it for the rest of your life and you don't have to start grappling with it and trying to learn it later on in life. So I always encourage them to keep speaking their language. And again, in the home as well, to speak it. And so, Madam Speaker, my point is this, that I do try to actively represent them. And I want to put a couple of points on the record here. Contrary to popular belief, Madam Speaker, maybe it's not fair to say popular belief, but many people don't feel that Aboriginals are paying taxes, but I will tell you that they are. They're paying a lot of sales tax. They're paying excise taxes on fuel and tobacco, depending where they purchase. They are counted in our population numbers when we are given equalization payments, which make up about a third of our actual revenue in our treasury each year, Madam Speaker. Their population counts towards the dollars we receive, and we get more money from the federal government because of them. And we know they use our services like roads and hospitals and even schools. They have their own school in Wakaba, but some of the children also travel to the school in Waikagama, right next door. So they do count, Madam Speaker, and I certainly aspire to do everything I can to represent them and to be responsive and to be an advocate for them here in this legislature. And I know some of the ministers across the way will know that I've approached them in the past about issues in Wakaba to represent their community. So, Madam Speaker, I know we talk about minority rights and the needs of people in the province, and I just want to put on the record here today that the Aboriginal people in this province deserve representation here in this chamber, and I aim to provide it to them as their acting MLA in Inverness right now, and I would hope that I would have the chance for that to continue. But I don't think we've heard too much from our Aboriginal community on the boundaries, perhaps for the reasons that I've already stated, that they often wonder, well, why would we vote for somebody who's running for a provincial seat? And I'm only speculating on why. As I have in my previous comments, there's probably all kinds of other reasons. But suffice it to say that that's another group of people that deserves to be represented. Madam Speaker, I know that from time to time I'll share a little bit of Gaelic here in the legislature. And that's my efforts at trying to draw attention to the importance of that language and to remind people, many people in this province who have lineage to Gaelic-speaking peoples, to remember where they come from. And some people, and we see the comments, and I respect their opinions. Some people say, well, why would you bother putting money in an old, dead language or something that's old? And I don't blame them, Madam Speaker, for saying that, especially if they don't come from that background. I think if they do come from that background, they really should learn their history, and not to lecture them, but if they did learn about their history and what happened to their language and why it's disappeared, they might take a little more pride in it. And if you respect your parents, and by extension you respect your ancestors, you should know your history. You should make efforts to learn it and to respect what your people went through, because if your great grandfather, or in my case, grandfather and his two brothers, great grandfather and his two brothers went into battle at the Battle of Culloden and risked their lives back in days when there was grape shot coming out of cannons, which is basically loose nails flying across a field and disemboweling people, which could be your very ancestors. To me, Madam Speaker, if you respect your parents, think if your brother or your parent was going through that. That's the way I look at it. And I know as Remembrance Day approaches, we often think about all those people that went through that for Canada. I go back even further, Madam Speaker, and I think about what my own people went through, say at the Battle of Culloden, and going back even further throughout history. To me, that's important, and that's why I think anybody who has some ancestry, in this case, if it's Gaelic ancestry, they should be looking at their history. And out of respect for their people, they should learn that. And I know the member from Pictou East is holding up a tartan tie today, so he's showing his colors, and that's good to see. And also the member from Pictou West is as well. So they take pride in where they come from. And Madam Speaker, we're talking about humble investments, modest investments in this kind of thing that, to me, make a difference. So I do respect some people say, don't bother with any of that. It's a waste of money. Government should stick to its core. I would put this in the category of education, Madam Speaker. And these are very modest sums of money. Really, it's education that results in people knowing more who they are. And I think that helps, Madam Speaker, save money in other areas. We have so many wayward youth today. We always have, I suppose, but we see stories of bullying and things like that. The more young people know about where they come from, the more they respect where they come from, their own people. And of course, that leads them to respect other people and other Native communities, whether it be our Aboriginal peoples here in the province, our Acadians, the foreign Protestants that arrived in the mid-1700s in the South Shore. You name it, Madam Speaker. The more we know about where we come from and the more we respect our past, the more we respect those around us. So there's another group, Madam Speaker, that I represent in my area, and that's why I do on occasion share a bit of Gaelic here in the legislature. And thank you. Somebody's saying they appreciate that. So, Madam Speaker, I don't want to take too much more time here, but suffice it to say that that this process has received a lot of, to decide these boundaries, there's been a lot of negative commentary and media on it. There's a lot of people unhappy, and I don't know if there's going to be people happy at the end of it, Madam Speaker, but it's too bad that it hasn't gone a little more smoothly. And at the end of the day, I guess people will still get to vote, but I'm not going to say too much more other than I do think that Nova Scotians' voices should be the loudest heard on this subject. And I do also want to put on the record, I feel bad for the committee that went around the province. I know they took some abuse. And it's not like they're getting paid any great sums of money to travel the province. And they have a delicate, it's not really, it's more of a, their real challenge is to try to balance out the terms that they were presented with, that were presented to them by a majority NDP committee of this legislature, with what they're hearing from all the Nova Scotians around the province. It's been difficult for them, and I want to thank them for their efforts, and I want to apologize for all members of this legislature for any abuse they've taken, because I don't think they deserved any of it. With that, Madam Speaker, I will take my place.
Thank you. I now recognize the honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to have some brief comments to make about my riding of Preston, one of the 4 ridings that was targeted by this government to eliminate, and it's very unfortunate they did that. The Preston riding is very unique in the province, and for over 200 years, the community has tried to get elected representation, and luckily in 1993, that did happen with the election of the Honourable Wayne Adams, the first black Nova Scotian ever elected to the Nova Scotia legislature, and indeed the first black cabinet minister ever in the province of Nova Scotia. And his picture hangs over here in the chamber, and it's quite a privilege to set in his shadow as we move forward. Now, Wayne Adams is a very good friend of mine and a great supporter, and I've always been a great supporter of his, as we used to occupy adjacent ridings. I'm the 4th MLA to ever be elected in this riding, and as it sits today, and if this process goes through here as it will be, I'll be the last one to set in the riding, and I am of next year, depending when the election's called, I could be the longest setting member ever in this riding. I've been elected 3 consecutive times in the riding. I'm the only person that's ever been elected more than once. I'm the only person only party that's ever been elected more than once at a time. It was first held by the Liberal Party, then by the NDP Party, and then by the Conservative Party, and then by myself representing the Liberal Party at the time when it went through. There's been some discussion by an individual in this legislature that perhaps I don't do a good job representing this riding because I'm not from the black community. Well, I can tell you the black community as well as the white community in my riding have elected me. And each time I do get elected, I get elected with a bigger majority than the time before, which I'm very proud of. And I'm very proud of that. And it just goes to show you, if you represent the people properly, you listen to their concerns, and you work with them, indeed you can be reelected again. It's unfortunate that that this boundary review has turned out the way it has, a real schmozzle, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. But it's been an honor to represent this area. It's been a real cultural enrichment for me to represent the black community as well as the white community in my area. I represent the communities of Porters Lake, Lake Echo, East Preston, North Preston, Cherrybrook, Lake Loon, Montague, and Mineville, and some other communities in the area. And it's a very diverse community, and that makes it so special. It really does make it so special. And there's a lot of cooperation between the two cultures in my area, and that is very, very important. Very important. We see a lot of assistance in both ways when you talk about things that matter to the communities, and indeed it's important that that uniqueness to the community does continue. You know, when I see the boundary review that happened, I've been here, I'm the 3rd longest sitting member in this legislature, and When I see the schmozzle that was created by this, it's unbelievable. I have never seen so much gerrymandering by government, so much misdirection by government in the whole situation. It's absolutely disgraceful what's happened. If the government didn't get what they want the first time, they went back and said, do it over again, that's not what we want. And the commission had been interfered with. I've never seen that. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of the province of Nova Scotia. So they actually interfered, this government interfered with this Boundary Review Committee. So it leads you to ask why. Why did that happen? Well, I can tell you what I think happened, and this opinion is shared by many, many people in this province. I believe that this province, this government, tried to manipulate where the seats would be. And where the seats turned out to be, more seats in Metro, 2 more seats in Metro. Now, where does the NDP government get most of the support? In Metro. Isn't that interesting? Just so happens that when you do all the boundary review, they wanted a couple more seats in Metro. In the meantime, they take away seats in the rural area. Taking away seats in the rural area. And in some Cape Breton, the Speaker's riding, himself is riding is going to disappear, which is very unfortunate. But when you see what's happening, if you can get 2 more seats, it has a net effect of approximately 4 seats, because you take them out of the rural area, you dump them in Metro, so all of a sudden the government could, in theory, win an election next time on the fact that they have 2 more seats in Metro and 2 less seats in the rural areas. So that makes it quite interesting. So why all the gerrymandering by the Justice Minister, by the Premier, and everybody else to try to get this out to come out the way they wanted it? Not the way it should be, but the way they wanted it. Now, the seats that are held by the 4 minority seats, it's just a coincidence. It's absolutely a coincidence that this boundary committee was told that you had to change the percentage of people voters in an area in those particular ridings in particular. It's also very strange that the NDP, the people that decided what this commission was going to do and how they were going to do it, was a majority member on the committee and set the agenda for how it was going to be put together. So they said everything had to be within 25%, effectively wiping out the 4 minority seats in the province that had been probably about 200 or more years had gone into getting these seats in place. And I think they're important. I think they're very important. In a seat that I used to represent on the Eastern Shore, had a large Acadian population. Now, that Acadian population, in my generation, had told their children not to speak French because you couldn't get a job. You couldn't get a job because you spoke French. And indeed, they almost lost their French culture. Acadians, all in the Chesney-Cook area, very proud people, very intelligent people, were telling their children, don't speak French because you can't get a job. Now, that's disgraceful. And we see the Acadian seats that have been 3 Acadian seats in the province. Those are very positive that happened. And it just so happens that none of those seats are held by the NDP. None of them. So it's an easy way, again, to maybe improve their odds of an election victory by eliminating the 4 minority seats in the province, ensuring, well, those seats we probably can't win anyway. We haven't won them. My seat, I think, was the only one that's ever been won one time for a very short period of time by the NDP. We can't win those seats anyway, so let's eliminate them. So we eliminate those seats and increase our odds of winning the next election. And that's a fact. That is a fact. Because I don't think the NDP had any possibility of ever winning these seats in the immediate future. So when you look at this stuff, and you see what's going on here, it's a process of eliminating minority seats that the NDP can't win, haven't won except for one very short time. And so what do? You gerrymander the seats to make sure you can win power. And if you do that process enough, That's against everything in our democracy that we stand for in this country, everything. So as time goes on and the people talk more and more about this and see this, the real test is going to come on election day. Next election day, when people come and realize that indeed they don't live in the writing they thought that they did live in before, and bang, they've got a problem. So who do they vote for? By that time, it'll be much too late. This government will push this bill through. They'll have done all the PR work on it they figure they can do to get away with it, and decide that, we stampled all over and stomped on everybody's democratic rights, and, that's okay. We're the NDP. We can do that, and we really don't care. Well, I think come next election, this NDP government is going to get an awful shock. Going to get a terrible shock. When I'm hearing from people, and a friend of mine who voted NDP last time swore up and down. When I say that and when I swore up and down, I mean in a very positive way, not in a negative way, that he would never vote NDP again. Never vote NDP again. He was a card-carrying NDP member. NDP member. Finished. Absolutely finished. And there's a little bumper sticker out there that I've started to see around. Don't blame me. I didn't vote for them. I didn't vote NDP. Well, I think you're going to see a few more of those, and you're going to see some of them are going to say, I voted NDP, please don't blame me for all the stuff that's happened. And, it's been very serious. And when you talk about all the boundary review and all the time we're spending in here talking about it, and the fact they're going to go to Shelburne with the Law Amendments Committee in the number of years I've been here. I was first elected in 1993. I've never seen anything so crazy in all my life. But anyway, the Premier's decided that's where the committee's going to go, and that's where the committee's going. That'll be interesting to see what kind of comments are made in that area. So when we see all the time we're spending on this issue, and it's an important issue, if it would have been done properly, it's a very, very important issue. The boundaries are very important to people. I know in my case, we worked on the municipal boundaries in Cherrybrook and community of Cherrybrook Lake Loon. At one point wanted to stay with Cole Harbour. And they wanted to stay with Cole Harbour and the municipal boundary because they had worked very hard to get the Cole Harbour place put in place, and they worked with the community. And it's a community that works very, very well together. And they did make that fight, and they did win the fight, not the initial year, but the next election they did, and that's been changed this last election. But indeed, they did get an opportunity to do that. So it's there. So you see these boundary issues are very important to people. But the real problem in this province is our economy. We should be talking about our economy. We should let the Electoral Boundary Committee do their job, and let them do their job, let the first report go through, and this would have been settled. Would have been a few words on it here, the system would have gone through, and it would have been fine. But no, it was interfered by this government in hopes that they would gain some more seats by it. I don't think that's going to happen. That was their hope, but I think that's not going to happen based on the terrible job you've done in the economy. You see their government putting over $500 million into companies. Companies are failing, people are getting laid off that the money was put into, and those are the things that we really should be talking about in this House. We should be talking about that every day. We should be talking about the people that can't find work. We should be talking about the businesses that don't have work. They're barely surviving to get through. The worst economy in the whole province, if not in North America. The highest taxes in probably North America. In this province, the highest taxes. Put the GST up 2%, and as I said here before, most people don't realize 2 cents. 2 cents on the GST doesn't sound like very much, but it's a 25% tax increase. 25%. That's a double-digit tax increase. And that was promised by this government before they got elected. We would not increase that tax. I'm really afraid that if the federal government comes along and it adds their 2% back on again, we're going to be in an impossible situation in this province. You talk to business people all over the province, and are they employing people? They can't hire anyone else because they don't have the work to do it. Very seldom do you run into a company and say, I'm doing as well as I did last year. And mostly it's because if they work offshore. If they work offshore or work in another province, they can say that. A few of them few companies in Nova Scotia are doing reasonably well, but the majority are not. And that's what hurts our economy. We don't have our small businesses growing and employing local people and working with local people to ensure that they've got a job this year, next year, and the year after. We're never, ever going to see any economic improvement in Nova Scotia. And it's got so bad tax-wise here, with the income tax and with the GST up so high, or the HST, whichever you want to call it, we see people, seniors, that are moving out of Nova Scotia because they save a lot of money on income tax, a lot of money on income tax. I have friends that are leaving here now, and they tell me after they've done all the information on the taxes they're going to save, they'll save about $6,000 a year. $6,000 a year on taxes. And when you look at how this is going to how negatively connect and destroy our economy as time goes on, because more and more people are leaving the province, either to get work or to retire. We used to come to Nova Scotia to retire, but they can't afford to stay in Nova Scotia now. Can't afford to stay here in Nova Scotia. So what happens? They move to Ontario or Alberta. Alberta's got the cheapest tax in the province. Newfoundland very soon is going to be a whole lot better off than Ontario is, so that's going to be interesting to see how that affects our young people. They won't have to go to Alberta anymore. They'll be able to go to Newfoundland and work, and they'll be coming home on the weekends. So that's going to be interesting. And this government talks about training people. Well, I can tell you, they want to change the training process if they want to get qualified tradespeople here and people here that make the economy go. They want to change it a lot. And they haven't done that. We had in public accounts the other day, the Deputy Minister of Education in. And we talked about the improvements to the trades, and I can tell you, I sit there as chair of the committee in absolute disbelief from what I heard. Absolute disbelief. I was so wishing I could have asked some questions. One lady from the Department of Education said, well, when one of the members asked a question, well, what actually do you learn? What are you trying to teach young people when you're there? And she said, well, hand dexterity. Okay, I guess. I ran a manufacturing business for a long time, and the programs they were talking about, the things the Department of Education was doing, certainly is not going to have a major impact on our economy. Spend a lot of money, and I think the results are going to be very, very poor. And again, that has to be, all the years I've been on Public Accounts Committee, and I'm probably the longest sitting member, I am the longest sitting member in sitting in this chamber today, that's seen such a disgraceful display of what's not happening and what needs to be done in the education system to get our young people into the workforce so they can be have some productivity. And the government members may not agree with me, but I can tell you the job numbers, they show it. So many jobs have been lost in this province. So many jobs have been lost in this province. Jobs that are not coming back. They're not coming back. They tote some numbers over there that they say improve these numbers, but I don't know where they're getting them. It sure isn't from any reliable source, because the jobs of so many jobs have been lost in this province since this government took place that it's unbelievable. They spent $500 million trying to prop up some big companies. And you see what it was, and there's 1,200, I think it's 1,210 people lost their jobs because of this $5 billion. That was $500 million, that was spent. That means for every job lost, it cost taxpayers in Nova Scotia $47 million. $47 million to lay off 1,210 people. $47 million each. $47 million each. $47 million each. So at the rate they're going, we're going to see this province bankrupt by the time this government leaves. Now, when you see these bad investments, that this government has made, after when they sit on this side of the House all the time, going on about how they wouldn't do corporate welfare and all these idealistic things they had in mind, and all the great plans they had for the province. Well, the great plans are not very good for the province, not good for employment in this province, and definitely not good for our economy. And there's other things that this government has done. It seems to be unbelievable, the stuff that's, where they get the ideas from, I don't know. And the answers we get here in question period, they're totally unbelievable. When you look at the facts and you see what's going on, or the lack of answers we get, if the economy was as good as they say it is, which it isn't, when we get answers back in question period, we should be toting the companies that have grown and prospered in the province instead of all the people that have been laid off. And we know that. The people out in the communities know that. They know that they can't find jobs in this province. And they know that they've lost jobs. Their neighbors have lost a job. They might have lost a job themselves, or a family member have lost a job. They can't get these jobs back. Getting a part-time job just doesn't cut it. When you lose thousands of full-time jobs, and some of them come back in part-time positions, it makes you wonder why companies are doing that. Because companies have to run very cost-effectively. And unfortunately, you can hire someone part-time, and if you hire them for few enough hours, you don't have to pay all the benefits you have to pay to an employee that's a full-time employee. That ultimately cuts your costs. That does not help the employee. It does not help our economy when that happens. But indeed, it may keep a business going when it's a really tough time like they're having now. I've talked to many friends of mine in business. They say they're just scraping by, just scraping by. And if they didn't, a lot of them say if they didn't have so much investment, or if they could sell their business or get rid of it somehow, they would close down or move to another province and work. And some of them have done that. A lot of the branch plants in Nova Scotia, very large reputable companies, have moved their operations from Halifax and Burnside and other places in Halifax to Moncton, because it's easier, it is cheaper to operate a business in Moncton than it is anywhere else, anywhere in Nova Scotia. So that gets scary. Maybe we should ask some questions about Bowater.
Order. The honourable member for Preston has the floor, and we'll bring the subject matter back to the bill. Bill 94, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, I believe a lot of this is related to the bill that's on the table. It's, you know, when they start cutting boundaries up, to win an election, it makes you wonder what the motive is. And we see there seems to be a lot of interest in this chamber, and I can tell there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of emotion here from, I know, the opposition parties, because, you know, we see our community suffering. We see our community suffering. We see the people in our community suffering. I mean, we are very emotional about this and very concerned about this, and it's very hard to keep your cool when you're talking about this, especially when you're hearing all kinds of rhetoric from the other side of the House that isn't necessarily true. And, you know, it's difficult to say to somebody, you know, we're spending a lot of time in this boundary review because it was gerrymandered by the government, and everybody knows that. Everybody you talk to knows about that. It's unbelievable how many people are talking about this. And then they come right back and they say the same thing again. We want to get the economy going in Nova Scotia. We want a job. We want our kids to be working in Nova Scotia. Why waste your time on this bill? Because this party wants to try to get a couple more seats in the legislature, maybe hold on to power one way or another. That's what this is about. We really should be talking about the economy, what's happening here with this province and the dismal state that it's in. And it's a shame, because we have incredibly skilled people in this province. We have very intelligent people. We have the largest number of universities, I believe, in any province or state in North America, and high-quality universities. High-quality universities. People come from all over the world to go to these universities. And yet, we can't turn that, this government hasn't been able to turn that success into the economy and make the economy grow and prosper in this province. So it's very troubling, very troubling. It's very troubling for people out there that are trying to make a living, trying to get people, their young people back into the province that have gone to Alberta, and trying to get a situation where their family can be together. And, you know, typically what happens with young people, they decide they might want to go see new horizons and try jobs in other places, and that's fair enough, that's fine. I mean, that's one thing you should do as you're young, get new experiences. And when you come back home, in this case to Nova Scotia, hopefully, that it helps the economy, because you bring people that are highly skilled, highly trained, and with lots of experience that can do things in the province. Well, what's happening in Nova Scotia, with the tax structure we have, with the poor job that this government's done creating jobs in the province, number one, there's no job to come back to. And number two, if you do come back to a job, you make less money and pay more tax. So why would you move back to Nova Scotia? You just won't. You absolutely won't. We've seen Newfoundland go through about the same thing we're headed for. Where home prices have gone down, and the homes aren't selling what they were. But Newfoundland now has got their act together. They have got their act together, and they've moved back now. They're going to be a very much have province soon. And we see what's happened. We're talking about Bowater. We should talk about Bowater a little bit. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit and see what Bowater did. I mean, they took the checks and they disappeared. They disappeared. They disappeared. And from what I understand, when the Premier went to present the checks to Bowater, that the executives from Bowater didn't even bother to come. They just said, thank you very much. We will pay our loans off in Quebec, and we will close this facility as quickly as possible and leave the Nova Scotia taxpayers to pay the bill, to absolutely pay the bill. And when you look at what happened, and you see what's happened with the Bowater in particular, you see what happened with Bowater, all those millions of dollars absolutely wasted of taxpayers' money. And you only had to go to Newfoundland and see what they did in Newfoundland. Same manager here that was in Newfoundland when they shut the mill down there. So he must be the manager they send to shut mills down. And they shut it down, left taxpayers on the Nova Scotia on the bill for what's 56 million, was it? 56 million? Or was it more than that? Was it 56 million, Bowater? I can't remember the exact number, but you know, it was probably higher than that. Was it? Nothing to it. Nothing to it at all. I mean, all the funding agreements aren't public. We're making it up.
Order. The honourable member for Preston has the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, when the final accounting is done in Bowater, when we finally be able to get the exact accounting what all this cost, I'm sure it's going to be more than 56 million. And what did we get for 56 million? All kinds of unemployed people. We got all kinds of contractors that have no work now, and the list goes on and on. It was a poor deal, badly negotiated, and unfortunately, when this government loses the next election, which hopefully they will do, and what I'm hearing in the community, that's going to happen, the unfortunate part of that is they'll walk away, and all the people in Nova Scotia, we end up paying the bill. We'd be paying the bill. We'd be paying that bill for another 50 years. And the worst of it is, it would have created some employment, or even maintained some employment. It would have been beneficial to all Nova Scotians. But instead, it's really hit us all. And there's more and more deals out there that I'll talk about it another day. But it shows how this government has no idea how to do economic development. And the only way that they figure they can win the next seat, they can gerrymander this review process and try to get some more seats in Metro out of the rural area, and that's what it comes down to. Shove 2 more seats into Metro, forget the rural areas of the province, get rid of the minority
There's only 3 minutes
ridings,
left anyway.
and away you go. Now we're all set. Those seats we didn't win anyway, so now we're not going to win them again. You know, so get rid of them, and possibly now we can win the new seats in Metro. We get the highest popularity of any place around. So as you review this whole thing and look at the whole thing, people out there understand what's going on. They realize this, and they see this, and this government's going to get a shock when they go to the polls the next time, a real shock. And it'll be interesting to see how it all works out. And it's the other things they've done too that again I'll talk about the next time I get a chance to speak here on this topic. But it's going to be interesting to see how all this works and how it works out in Nova Scotia as we see the people in Nova Scotia suffer more and more and more. And today, when I see people come into my constituency office, that used to make it every payday, from payday to payday they could make it. People are coming in now with reasonably good incomes that can't make it anymore. And they can't make it because of taxes this government put on them. They just can't do it. I mean, you change the harmonized sales tax or GST, whatever you want to call it, and add 25% tax increase. That's a 25% tax increase. A 25% tax increase. And it's a couple of dollars here, a couple of dollars there, but it all adds up over a year. And as this proceeds, and you see people suffering, actually coming in that were doing well. It makes you wonder how we can ever get the economy going again in this province. I can tell you it's going to be a major, major problem. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to speak on this another day, and perhaps we can just adjourn the debate for today, and I'll continue my remarks at another time. Thank you.
Thank you. The adjournment for debate has been made. All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. Now recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the government's business for today. The House will now rise and meet from the hours of 2 to 6 p.m. Tomorrow, but first I'll hand it over to the Deputy House Leader of the Official Opposition to tell us what the business tomorrow will be.
The Honourable Deputy House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in addition to celebrating Halloween and the birthday for the member for Argyle, we will be calling Bills 103 and Bill 95.
That as we have reached the moment of interruption, we will now proceed